Now, the Russian envoy to the United Nations is once again dismissed as dubious, the UN General Assembly probe into war crimes. Now, the Vitaly Churkin said the non-binding UN resolution would not contribute to the cessation of hostilities, and the General Assembly does not have the authority to conduct such probes. Churkin added that it is against the UN Charter when a flawed resolution which fails to get a consensus within the Security Council instead gets passed through the General Assembly. Churkin reiterated that the issue currently under the UN Security Council consideration should not be interfered with by the General Assembly. The UN General Assembly adopted the resolution on Thursday calling for the creation of an impartial and independent mechanism to probe war crimes in Syria. Let's speak to Edward Corrigan. He's an international human rights lawyer, and he joins us via Skype from Ontario. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Mr. Corrigan. Now, I'd like to get your opinion about this resolution, because many have criticized that looking at its sponsors and co-sponsors like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and even Turkey, it will be quite obvious that this fact-finding commission, if put into place, would not be impartial and would only be looking at the Syrian government and not the terrorist organizations that are operating on Syrian soil.
Well, I agree with that assessment, and also with the ambassador. This is a highly politicized motion, and it is in many respects out of character. But we must remember that the General Assembly can only approve non-binding resolutions. So, for example, the resolution which is cited by the Israelis for the partition of Palestine, in fact, it is legally a non-binding resolution, has no force and effect. And interestingly, the General Assembly actually withdrew that resolution later, which the Zionists never talked about. But this is a politicized resolution. It was an independent and really objective commission. I think it would serve a lot of purposes. And, but it has to look at the role of state parties like the United States, Britain, Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, which are invading and attacking a country and trying to overthrow the regime for dubious reasons. But also, it's hypocritical of the Americans and the Saudis that there should be a similar resolution looking at Saudi war crimes in Yemen. And how about American war crimes in Iraq, Abu Ghraib prison, American war crimes in Afghanistan, British war crimes in Afghanistan, American, British, French, and Italian war crimes in Libya. So, there's a lot of hypocrisy here. I guess the Russian ambassador to the United Nations is saying that, this is politicized. This is clearly an attempt to smear the Syrian government and probably the Russian government, but of course give a blank check and no checking of the war crimes of al-Nusra Front, al-Qaeda, ISIS, what was the role of the Western allies, and of course Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. This arms and supplies didn't just come out of nowhere. This was an illegal invasion of a sovereign country, and that clearly is a breach of the United Nations Charter and international law, and of course there's lots of war crimes associated with that. So I think the Russian ambassador is right. This is sort of a hypocritical exercise. And it is not because Russia and China, for example, would veto any concrete measures at the Security Council.
Right, Mr. Corrigan, let me just jump in there. As you've just said, this resolution was highly politicized, but it also goes in line with that psychological battle that is being waged over the perception when it comes to Syria.
Well, there is this ongoing propaganda war, and there's a report published in The Independent in Britain, which is a very reputable paper, saying that the Pentagon spent $500 million fabricating and creating videos on behalf of the terrorists in Syria. There's also sort of other things too, but there's the press coverage in the international or the mainstream press in North America has been appalling. It's just repeating lies after lies, unsubstantiated assertions coming out of a basement in England. It's been very, very politicized, and they're not really going in. And a lot of, for example, the Western press is not even in Aleppo. A lot of them are not even in Syria, but they're just using biased reports. There was a report the Egyptian government captured or arrested a gentleman for creating fake videos about children being injured in Damascus, when in fact this was occurring in Egypt. So there is this massive propaganda war for public opinion.
Right.
And a lot of it, especially in the West, it is false propaganda and very destructive.
Okay, let's leave it there for now. That's international human rights lawyer Edward Corrigan joining us via Skype from Ontario. Mr. Corrigan, it's always a pleasure having you with us here on Press TV.